Leandro. Okay, hi everyone. It's a great privilege to be here on behalf of IATEFL BSIG, and I'd like to just say a big thank you to APIBA BE BSIG and the conference organizers and the university for allowing this wonderful day of personal development to happen. As some of you might know, I'm beaming in from Düsseldorf, and this morning at 6 a.m. Düsseldorf time, 2 a.m. Buenos Aires time, I took a quick look at the different weather conditions, expecting to be able to make this a significant contrast between the two. And as you can see, it's significantly colder in Düsseldorf. I imagine that's often the case. What might surprise you is this is actually the warmest day by far that we've had in 2017. So I'm quite looking forward to, after today's proceedings, getting outside for a couple of hours and enjoying the slightly warmer weather. Just to give you an idea of what it was like 2 weeks ago, this is what it looked like in Düsseldorf for a lot of the early part of the year. Quite different, I imagine, to conditions where you are right now in Argentina. Okay. So to start today, I was hoping to maybe find out a little bit about you. Then I'd like to tell you something about IATEFL BSIG, and myself, before moving on to the serious business of transitioning from a business English teacher to a business English trainer. Good. So, what I thought I just want to ask you a couple of questions. I can see you all on camera, and it looks like there's a fantastic crowd in today. I'm on quite a small laptop here, so the image of you is quite small. I'm going to ask you to put your hands up in the air if the answer to the question is yes. Please really put it up in the air high, otherwise I won't be able to see it. Okay. So just out of interest, how many of you are coming from Buenos Aires today? Okay, great. It looks like almost everybody. How many? If you have come from outside the city, or perhaps from Uruguay, something like that? Okay, great. A handful of hands, it looks like, towards the back. Fantastic. It's nice to see a few people who've made the long journey. How many of you teach at a university? Okay, quite a few people. And in company? Okay, a lot of in-company teachers. And how many of you are freelancers? Okay, also quite a large proportion of our attendees today. How many of you would call yourselves teachers? Majority of you. And trainers? Okay, great. Good. Okay, well, yeah, it's nice to be here, like I said. Another thing that I was very happy to see was APIBA is significantly older than I am, which is becoming increasingly unusual. So it seems to be a teaching association with a long history, and quite a few years older actually than IATEFL BSIG. So to introduce IATEFL BSIG and myself, IATEFL is one of the largest ELT associations in the world. I'm sure we've got a few members at least in the audience today. It's headquartered in Faversheim in the UK, and we have about 4,000 members at the moment, slightly over. BSIG it's a Business English Special Interest Group, and it's the biggest special interest group at IATEFL. And we're turning 31 this year. And we're hosting our 30th annual conference in Malta in November. Our membership as a subgroup of IATEFL fluctuates quite a bit, but the numbers are usually between about 400 700 and 800 members. Our strongholds are really in the UK and Germany. That's where most of our members come from. It also, as a result, is where we hold most of our face-to-face events. We do have members, though, from 61 countries around the world. So increasingly, we're trying to do more and more online events so that we can cater for these members as well. And that's why these sort of partnerships like we have today with the APIBA BE are becoming increasingly important. What you should see on the screen is just a couple of pictures from 2016 events that we held. So on the left here, this is from the IEEE annual conference in Birmingham in April last year. And these are a couple of the members of the IEEE BE committee. On the right-hand side here, we have some of the people that helped with the organization of the BE conference in Munich in November last year. And obviously at the bottom right, that's me earlier this year. What I really like about these pictures actually is how they represent the very international and diverse nature of IEEE BE, particularly actually the events organizing team from Munich. Because like I said, most of our members come from the UK and from Germany, but we have Helen Strong here, the events coordinator, who's from Scotland and lives in Munich now. We have Andreas Strezik from Poland. We have Chris Stanza, who lives in Stuttgart and is currently relocating to Bulgaria. Mercedes Viola from Uruguay. Justine Arena from Brazil. Dana Poklopovic, who is speaking a bit later today from Buenos Aires. Shanti Kumaswamy Street, originally from Malaysia, and Italian British dual national living in London, and then myself from South Africa and now living in Düsseldorf, Germany. So I think that just highlights our kind of diversity very, very nicely. You might be asking why me, when you can see all of my esteemed colleagues standing next to me there. One of the reasons the coordinator of BE asked me to give this presentation was I am the online team and web coordinator for IEEE BE. So I'm usually the first point of contact for teaching associations and individuals, business English trainers outside Europe in particular. People who can't really attend our face-to-face events, but want to get more involved with us and our online activities. Okay, so to start, maybe, moving on from the introductions, I have been speaking to and surveying some of IEEE BE members from a few different places, from Russia, India, Brazil, the UK, Germany, Poland, South Africa, China, and so on, to what they associated with the word teacher and what they associated with the word trainer. This was just a free word association, and I made notes of some of the things that came up more frequently. So for teachers, the consensus often seemed to be that these were generally people who worked in schools, they worked with children, they worked in the formal education sector, that they were instructors, that they had all of the knowledge and they were transferring that to the students who didn't. That was generally quite prescriptive and quite rigid, and quite academic. And quite often it was geared towards certifications and qualifications, to demonstrate their ability in a certain area, in this case their ability to use English according to some predefined standard. And by comparison, there were some quite different ideas for trainer. Quite a few people associated this with sports. Football trainer was one of the things that quite a few people said. It was generally associated with performance, being able to do something well, and often with people who have to perform at a high level. It was often more important than the process, and it was seen as more for adults than for children. And the distinctions that they made. I also looked at some dictionary definitions, and one I quite particularly liked, in part because it reflects our members' ideas, was the Cambridge Learners Dictionary definition, which you can see on screen, and for a trainer. And it said that a trainer is a person who teaches skills to people and prepares them for a job, activity, or sport. I particularly liked the examples because I think it highlighted three aspects that our members were alluding to. A new trainer has promised to make her an Olympic athlete of her, and again I think this emphasized the high performance aspect, the outcomes based aspect, and the very specific nature of training. The second example was she hired a trainer to create a personalized exercise schedule to get her into shape, and this emphasized the personalized aspect of training. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of activity. It's very individualized. And the third example, her trainer is a triple Olympic champion, which I think highlighted the skills that a modern trainer needs, and the high level of experience that's expected. It's not something that someone with very little training experience can do competently. Something I liked a little bit less about the Cambridge Learners Dictionary definition was the focus on UK and US pronunciation. I thought that tended to emphasize perhaps US and UK hegemony a bit. I think with modern business English training, we're moving away a little bit from that. So I should also point out that moving from being a teacher to being a trainer is perhaps not a case of one or the other. It's not binary. And I think your show of hands earlier indicated that. A lot of you said you were both teachers and trainers. So you're wearing both those hats. And in addition to those hats, we also wear lots of other hats. This slide is one I've stolen from a presentation from the IEEE Basic Annual Conference in Bonn in 2014. Gareth Humphrey presented his master's research on improving teacher-student interactions. I mean, he highlighted just some of the hats that we often wear in the training room. So in addition to being a teacher, in addition to being a trainer, we can be a coach, counselor, a business counterpart, a negotiation partner, an instructor, cheerleader even, a listener, an advisor, and so on. But if we look exclusively at teaching and training, like I said, it's not binary, but I do think it's a continuum that we're moving along as our identities shift. And some of us will be at different points on this continuum, depending on our teaching context, our pedagogical beliefs, and so on. But there is a clear trend in one direction. So I think more of us are moving from teachers to trainers than the other way around. And we're increasingly emphasizing some of the characteristics of a trainer over a teacher in the training environment. So when you think about this shift along the teacher-trainer continuum, I'm going to chart some of the changes that BSIG members have told me about and my own observations using my own modest career spanning the last 10 years as the timeline. So I started teaching in the city of Hamburg in northern Germany in 2007. That's a picture of it there. I'd worked in South Africa before, mostly in human resources management and staffing. I did my CELTA at the Hamburg School of English and took off from there. And most of my first year in 2007 and 2008 was spent teaching bankers at the HSH Noordbank in these buildings on the left-hand side here of the Ulster. And if I think back back to the average group I had in my first year there. HASA is a regional bank formed by a partnership between the city-state of Hamburg and Schleswig-Holstein. It's not particularly international. There was no real immediate need for English. It's a bit of a perk for them. And that was my experience quite often in my first year of teaching. That wasn't specific needs-driven business English. It was just a bit of general business English in case they needed it. Okay, but a very good introduction to the world of business English teaching. My second year then was also in Hamburg, but the financial crisis had hit, so the bank had cancelled all of its English classes, and most of my teaching was at the Finkenwerder Airport, which is one of Airbus's 2 final assembly plants for Airbus aircraft. Fortunately, because it was government funded, they weren't affected as badly by the financial crisis. And it was a fantastic year. I mean, it was really quite carefree in some ways. I used to cycle down to the Elbe River. I used to hop on one of the commuter ferries. It was a half-an-hour trip down the river to the airport, and then I'd spend my days cycling up and down the runway, going to various classrooms to teach Airbus engineers and managers business English. But again, I noticed some of the same characteristics in these classes as I had in the classes at HSH Nordbank the year before. And this is sort of what I guess business English looked like to me in 2007, both at HSH Nordbank and at Airbus. The groups were generally small, they were homogeneous, they were all German speakers working at predominantly German businesses. The majority of them had kind of an intermediate level of English. They could communicate quite competently, but they made a lot of things that we would consider mistakes. But it worked. Generally, they had no immediate need for the English. Quite often, it was a perk of the job that they were offered by the Human Resources Department. As this was before the global financial crisis, money wasn't such a big problem. So issues like return on investment came up far less frequently than they do today, because the needs were often unclear, just a bit fuzzy. Courses tended to be driven by a course book and thus a grammar syllabus, and we would often just use things like in-company, market leader, to the end. The people I worked with were predominantly British, and clients certainly preferred British native speakers. That was definitely a preference regularly expressed to our sales teams and to teachers. Also, the product was just standardized. It was the sort of thing that the teacher with some basic initial training could go into a classroom and deliver. Generally, it was quite low technology. I think the most technologically advanced thing I used was the photocopier. And with a couple of classes, I still used overhead projectors. And the classes were completely delimited to the 90 minutes. I'd go in, I'd interact with the learners, and then I'd leave. If they had a question after that, they had to wait until the next week when they could ask me. I didn't have any interactions with clients outside the classroom. And the approach was predominantly the communicative approach. That's what it looked like in 2017. Now the question is, what's changed in the last 10 years? Which way are we moving? So I'm going to look at 3 business macro trends, so changes that have been happening in the corporate world, and their impact on business English, what it means for us, and how this is driving the change from teacher to trainer. These trends are specialization, globalization, and digitalization. Look at some more detail. So, starting with specialization. I think it's an undeniable fact that the world is becoming increasingly complex and increasingly specialist. I can give you an example from a large German retailer that I go to on Wednesday mornings, part of the Metro group, and I go and see a couple of senior logistics managers at their hypermarket subsidiary called Real. It's quite similar to a Walmart or something like that. And these are three individuals who have worked their way up from the bottom into very senior positions. They're started off doing apprenticeships at the company. They have no university qualifications, and they're generalists. They understand the company very, very well, and over time have moved their way up. And even they themselves admit that this just isn't possible in Germany today. They wouldn't have had the opportunities with the knowledge and qualifications that they have today. And I think we increasingly also see this in business English. My colleagues, my peers are becoming more and more qualified. Master's degrees, even doctorates are increasingly becoming the norm. The impression I actually get is that Latin America, Asia, and Eastern Europe are ahead of where I am in Western Europe and North America in this regard. I'm often in awe of some of my colleagues' academic achievements. And we also increasingly specialize in what we offer. Some examples of that would be, I know Dana, who's speaking after me here, has specialized in ontological coaching, amongst other things. Because of my human resources background, I tend to focus on English and communications for human resources, amongst other things. An example from APIBA BE is, here's a webinar that we gave last year in September. And this is a woman called Erica Williams, and she focuses exclusively on English communication for marketing. So she's found her niche. So I think with this increasing complexity, as trainers, we've had to specialize more and more. And business English is moving into, it actually consists of lots and lots of different fields of ESP often. And I think that's a trend which is going to continue. And perhaps related to this trend of specialization, there's also a countervailing trend. And that's because complexity forces us to engage and collaborate with other specialists. We can't do everything ourselves anymore. So on the one hand, we're specializing. On the other hand, it's becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. And this again is a screenshot of a APIBA BE webinar. This was with Catherine Nickerson and David Katzner. And here we were looking at bridging the divide between the practical world of in-company business English training and the academic world of research in business English. So that was one example of how that's becoming more interdisciplinary, how we need to exchange ideas with our peers. On the same webinar, it's also becoming increasingly multidisciplinary. So here we were just looking at maybe some of the different fields that we need to be aware of for business English training. Management theory, communication studies, cross-cultural awareness. But I think it moves even beyond this. I think increasingly we need knowledge about specialist business fields. And if we don't have that knowledge ourselves, we have to collaborate with people that do. quite often now, if I'm involved in maybe individual training for someone who is working on a very specific project, we'll put together a group of trainers for that individual based on that individual's needs and the trainer's skills. So we might have one person who is focused on the presentation training aspect, one person who's focused on the language of that person's specialist field. I think this is one of the big challenges that we face while we're shifting from a traditional teacher role perhaps to the role of trainer. Second macro trend is globalization. And with an increasing exchange of ideas, capital, services, products, people between geographically distant places, culturally distinct places, this is becoming more and more relevant. If I had to shortlist words for the German business buzzword of 2016, globalization would be one of them. Everyone is talking about moving into other markets. Insurance companies that I go to, there's no more growth in Germany. The market is completely overinsured, so they're getting licenses for China, for India, for South American countries. Steel companies are expanding their global supply chain. Even ELT providers are moving out of their traditional markets. And a bit later I'm going to mention a provider in Germany who's gone completely online and is selling courses in North America and Asia and so on. So globalizing. So I think this trend of globalization, on the one hand, it drives a need for business English because people are interacting with business partners in other countries. And it also radically transforms, together with technology, the delivery of business English services and products. So what we do is changing because of this. Consequence, for example, is the rise of business English as a lingua franca. So a variety of English which nobody controls, and a variety of English which nobody or everybody owns, not necessarily not tethered to native speakers of English from the United States or from the UK or from Australia. So I think because of globalization, the days of the educated native speaker model are dead and dying. English has become truly global, and competent bilingual non-native speakers of English are the people who rule the nest now and are very much the mainstream and the future of international English. And this is simply just because interactions are predominantly between non-native speakers of English. So Evan Frendo, a popular IATEFL B6 speaker and long-term member, and one-time coordinator of IATEFL B6, he drew, for example, the following distinctions between more traditional English as a foreign language instruction, or this variety of English, and business English as a lingua franca. So, see that with business English as a lingua franca, focus is very much on business communication skills rather than native speaker-like language skills, and strategies. These could be communication strategies, checking and clarifying, repair. It can also be relationships rather than mimicking a fictitious native speaker model. The interlocutors are seen as communicators in their own right, and this legitimizes, I think, their varieties of English. The dominant variety of English in Germany, where I am, is often referred to as Denglish. I increasingly encourage clients to be aware that it is different to other varieties of English. But if they're doing business with people who are familiar with Germany and this variety of English, there's nothing wrong with using it. And often it actually communication works a lot better than trying to use what they might see as a more British variety of English. You see this with the European Parliament, for example. If you see an Italian politician or French politician standing up and making a speech in English, everyone can understand it perfectly. As soon as a native speaker from UK or Ireland stands up to speak in English, everyone sitting in the chamber puts on their headphones for the simultaneous interpretation. So they can understand each other perfectly. The problems aren't the non-native speakers of English, the problems are often the native speakers of English. So I think that's also recognizing that one more of the rising acceptability and respectability of BELF. Yep, so again, the main problems for communication breakdowns then are often inadequate communication skills. So that again perhaps changes the types of language we're going to be teaching as business English trainers. Often are just dealing with the person in front of us, dealing with their linguistic skills, we're dealing with their cultural background, rather than the types of people we'd encounter in a course book. Like I said, BELF is something that belongs to. So I think this is a key shift that's happened because of globalization. This is something that I understand is going to be covered in a little bit more detail by Dana and Analia a bit later today. Linked to this perhaps is the rise of international activism as well. And TEFL Equity, you can see their logo in the bottom right here, is a good example of this. They are an organization which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but they fight against discrimination against non-native English-speaking teachers. And like I indicated earlier on, when I started out in 2007, the majority of my colleagues were British, and the express preference of clients was for British native speakers in Germany. That has also changed a lot, partly because of BELF, but partly also because I think of the work of organizations like TEFL Equity. It'd be remiss of me not to mention something about the financial pressures of the business English. In 2007, it was pre-financial crash. A lot of the companies that I was going to were pretty flush. They had healthy training budgets, and they were quite happy just to pay for general business English classes, and as long as the clients were happy, as long as the students were having fun, that was usually enough. Times have changed a lot since then, partly because of the financial crash, but also just because of globalization and rising competition as a result of that. So things that I've certainly noticed in businesses is the focus on cost cutting, the focus on outsourcing, usually linked to cost cutting, and also automation, replacing expensive workers with less expensive software. It affects business, and as a result, it affects us. Buyers seem to increasingly want more for less. Return on investment is a phrase you hear mentioned regularly in sales meetings. People want to know what they're getting out of the training. They want to be able to quantify their investment in financial investment and their investment in time. And maybe one example of this was recently I sat in on a sales meeting with a large pharmaceutical company in Germany, and there were 5 people on the other side of the table from this company. One of them was the training officer, or a training officer from their human resources department. The other 4 people were either controllers, financiers, or accountants. So the bottom line was far more important than anything else. And I think that again, with globalization, is just going to increase. It's going to be more pressure. This reflects in what we do. In terms of cost cutting, I don't think there has been a real increase in Germany in the prices we charge for language training in the last 10 years. So we have to be more efficient. We have to use our resources better because clients aren't paying anymore. Outsourcing is becoming increasingly common, and particularly with online training. Why pay a trainer in Europe when you can pay a trainer to give the lesson online from Thailand or Vietnam? And automation is also becoming prevalent. You see software is often replacing face-to-face training, or at least augmenting it. And more clients are asking for blended learning solutions. I think that's also a trend which will continue. Fortunately, I don't think we're completely replaceable, but I think we're going to have to work together with and alongside software more. So these trends of cost-cutting, outsourcing, and automation, it's also been a bit of a pushback against that from business English teachers. And one very prominent example of that, which you might have seen online, is TORSIG. This is the Teachers as Workers Special Interest Group. I must say this is not an IATEFL SIG like BSIG, but it is, I think, an example again of this online activism. TORSIG is very much focused on improving the employment conditions of English teachers actually, and their ambition is to operate internationally. So it's not restricted to one geographical location. It's not a union, and I think this is very much again a response to the forces of globalization. 2 names worth mentioning in relation to TORSIG are Paul Walsh and Nicola Frentis, who have been very, very active in this. So I think that highlights the kind of tension that globalization causes in our industry. Perhaps another result of globalization is, I think, we're increasingly seen as business partners rather than English language instructors. And this maybe harks back to what I said earlier, that with specialization, we can't do everything ourselves. We can focus on one area and then we collaborate when we need skills and expertise in another area. This is also true for our clients, for our students. They can't do everything, and their worlds are also becoming increasingly specialized. And as a result, I think we are increasingly being asked for business advice, not just language advice. I'm often asked now for advice on various business areas where my clients feel I have expertise, or where they trust my judgment. ago, I was just the business English teacher. I got asked questions about grammar and vocabulary, and that was it. So that's also, I think, been a significant change. So ways we can actually influence the businesses we're going into in ways. The third and final macro trend is digitalization. And I mentioned that globalization would have been one of my shortlisted business English buzzwords in Germany last year. Digitalization would be my buzzword of the year. It's a word that every single manager seemed to be talking about. Quite often it seemed to be, particularly with maybe with the odd lower level learner, one of the only English words they knew. It's really lots and lots of companies are absolutely obsessed with integrating digital technology into their services and products. And when I was looking at the program, it looks like this afternoon Cecilia Ciccolini and Mabel Quiroga are also going to be talking about some digital aspects to being a business English trainer. So that's maybe something to look forward to this afternoon. Some examples of just how widespread digitalization is. This is an example of a steel company I go to in the Ruhrgebiet of Germany. And this is really the industrial heartland of Germany. It's after Northern England, it was the second area in the world that industrialized very rapidly. And in Germany they call it the land of steel and coal. And there are a lot of really big steel companies. ThyssenKrupp's probably the most well-known one. They've got quite a few big operations in Argentina and in Brazil. So some of you might even go to these companies. But they're very traditional businesses. They make and sell steel. And it's not a... Well, it is quite a complex product in some ways, but it's still only steel. And it's interesting to see even these very traditional, old-school German companies are digitalizing. So this is Klockner's website, and it's basically a online steel exchange. So you don't need to have your own salesperson, you don't need to phone anyone, you can buy all of your steel from them on this platform online. You never have to interact with another human being. The same is true for insurance companies. Basically you can buy your insurance online, and lots of other industries as well. Online grocery shopping has taken off in Germany in the last 2-3 years. More and more products and services available online. This is also true for English language teaching. This is a company called Landship. They're headquartered in Cologne. They're actually a competitor of mine. And very young. I think they're about 3-4 years old. And they've really grown to a medium-sized provider in Germany. And they are only online instruction with the teacher. So it's not software. And they have trainers around the world. They have sales offices now in the United States and in quite a few Asian countries as well as Europe. And their entire model is just to grow online. And they're very, very successful at it. They're doing very well at the moment. If I look at my own situation, 10 years ago, when I was in Hamburg, everything I was doing was face-to-face, in person. And now, I would say about 40% of my work is online. And this means I reach a completely different group of individuals. Where before it was mainly Germans. Now they could be French, they could be Spanish. I've got one client in Mexico at the moment. And it also allows us to constitute international groups online. So one emerging leaders program that I'm working on. Yeah, we have one person from France, we have one person from Romania, one person from sub-trend as well, perhaps, of digitalization is just the amount of information that is now available online. A lot of businesses talk about big data and using all this data. Hi. I don't know what happened there. I think I lost you for a second. Can you just make a bit of a noise if you can hear me? Okay, great. That's good. At least you're all still awake. Okay. Sorry, what I was saying, another sub-trend is big data and the amount of information that's available online. And I think the issue now is, this was highlighted by a message my sister, and that's a picture of her on the screen, sent me yesterday morning. She's a psychology graduate. She lives in Australia. She works in child protection services, but since becoming a mother, she's decided she wants to move out of that and become a teacher. So she's gone back to university and she's just starting a postgraduate qualification in education. She has to make quite a few presentations as part of this. So yesterday morning I saw I had a message on my phone asking for materials on presentations and whether I had any. And to be honest, I was a bit thrown. Not because I couldn't think of anything to recommend, but because I just have so much material on presentations that I didn't even know where to start. And I think this is also increasingly the case. So in a bit of a panic because I was on my way to the office, I just threw out the names of two popular TED Talk speakers and hope that would at least deal with the problem until later. But yeah, so I think this is another issue. So decision making is becoming a really key skill of trainer. It's not just about finding the information, it's about deciding what to use and what's best suited to our clients. And interestingly, you can also just see the long delays on the timestamps on those messages. And this also maybe is another feature of working internationally because of the time differences often that we're dealing with. I think it's about a 6-hour difference between Perth, Australia and linked to this, again, sub-trend is the wisdom of crowds. So that we can harness. We can crowdsource answers and information quicker and cheaper than we could previously. And maybe a very famous example is the situation between Encyclopedia Britannica, which was compiled by experts who wrote all the articles, and Wikipedia, where anyone could contribute to it. And very, very quickly, Wikipedia overtook Encyclopedia Britannica. As far as I know, Encyclopedia Britannica, after a long history spanning decades, doesn't exist anymore. And it was just because Wikipedia was as accurate, at least as accurate, and just the breadth of what it covered was far greater than what Britannica ever could. And I think one conclusion which people drew from this race between this competition between Wikipedia and Britannica was that crowds are always wise, and if you have enough people contributing, you end up with a good answer and quality data. I think we've come to realize that this is a mistake, and I think to highlight that, I've chosen the example of TripAdvisor, another very popular online service which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And I think TripAdvisor is great, but it's unreliable. Partly because it deals with tastes. It's very, very subjective.
So even if you're getting a lot of input from a lot of different people, the quality of the data isn't necessarily very good. I think here in Düsseldorf, where I am, one of the top-rated restaurants in the city, according to TripAdvisor, is the McDonald's at the Central train station. And I know that German food doesn't have the best reputation internationally, but it's really not that bad. So again, I think as trainers we have to make decisions about the data we're using and the information we're using. This very much made me think of associations like BSIG and APIBA BSIG, because this is where they come in. What you have sitting in the room with you is a crowd of experts with varied experience who you can source data from. And that's a huge advantage belonging to a professional teaching association. Something like APIBA is very much a Wikipedia. It's not a TripAdvisor in my mind. Third of the 4 sub-trends for digitalization is self-publishing. This is something that digital tools make easier than ever, and it's affordable, or at least cost-effective now. And a case in point of what we can do as individual trainers now on these 2 publications. And these were the joint winners of the 2015 David Riley Award for Innovation in Business English and ESP. I think that year there were about 15 or 16 entries, most of them from really big publishing groups, really high quality business English course books. We had a couple of entries from universities as well, and we had entries from 6 different continents. But the 2 books which stood out were these 2 self-published books. Presentation Lesson Hacks by Phil Wade, and Business English, The A to Z of Business English by Julie Pratton. So what we can do with the digital tools, the options are opening up to us, and the options we have as teachers are very different to the opportunities we have as trainers today. And then I think the final digital sub-trend for me is the world is becoming increasingly faster and faster. Clients regularly complain to me about this. They're stressed, they're busy, they're always connected, and the world is increasingly interconnected. 2007, when I left a classroom, I didn't have contact with students until the next week. They had a question for me. If they wanted input from me, they had to wait until the next class. If it was really urgent, they could track down my office number, they could phone the office, they could leave a message for me. Maybe I'd get back to them, maybe I wouldn't get the message. Where now, 2017, I'm always on. Always available. Clients have my email address, we share documents, they might record themselves giving a presentation, I'll take a look at it quickly before I meet them. So the interactions have changed completely, and I have synchronous and asynchronous interactions with the majority of my clients. And the majority of the learning now happens outside the FaceTime that we have. Really almost a flipped classroom model increasingly, where face-to-face training time is used for simulations, perhaps, it's used for personalized feedback, it's used for fine-tuning their communication and language skills, but most of the heavy lifting, most of the practice, most of the preparation happens in their own time, not my time, not the shared time at least. And that also then, I guess, begs certain, or asks certain questions about boundaries, because we need to decide when we're available, how we're going to be available, when clients can contact us, and also it perhaps changes the models we use for charging the services we offer. self-publishing, whether it's dealing with just the mass of information out there, whether it's accessing information in new and novel ways like crowdsourcing it, whether it's just dealing with the interconnectedness of the world, ask lots of questions about our ability to make decisions. And increasingly, I think we need to make the right decisions if we want to succeed as business English learners. Which digital tools to use, what information to use, where to use it, how much to use, when to be available, how to interact with clients. So if I jump forward to 2017, that's a picture from the harbour in Düsseldorf, some Frank Gehry buildings, which almost every big city has now. And I've been here since late 2011 in Düsseldorf, working mainly in Germany and around Europe, and some online. What I do has changed hugely since my time in Hamburg. And this is what business English is like to me and to a lot of my peers who are members of APIBA BE in 2017. And I must stress, it might not be like this for everyone, but I do think that the change from 2007 to 2017 for me is a path that a lot of us are moving along. Doing more and more of this and less of that earlier slide I showed you. So increasingly it's personalized one-to-one sessions, and that's because people have such specific needs. They're working on an important project, or they have to deliver some specific job at work, and it just wouldn't be appropriate to work on that in a group. When there are groups, they're often mixed international groups, and by mixed, that could be an origin, culture, L1, etc., rather than these homogeneous German-only groups. Generally, particularly in Germany, the linguistic competence is very, very high. So I actually spend very little time on grammar and vocabulary. And this is obviously not true for all parts of the world, and certainly not true for everyone, even in Germany. But the base language level in English is improving, and linguistic skills are becoming less and less important, I think. Some of the people on the European Common Framework of Languages I'm working with on C2, they're a lot more expressive and competent in English than a lot of the people I went to school with. And so that's something I think we're going to notice internationally, partly just because of the importance of English, partly because of globalization, partly because of the improved teaching in schools. Return on investment has become increasingly important, like I said. Budgets have become tighter for training, so everyone needs to be more efficient. And what we do is generally completely needs-driven. So the syllabus is flexible. It's whatever works in that situation. Means that we've jettisoned the native-speaking teachers, and all we look for is who's the best trainer for this specific job. Works increasingly specialist. What we offer is more personalized, and these are, I think, good trends to protect us from the encroachment of automated digital learning solutions. It's increasingly tech savvy, which for people who are not comfortable with technology, I think is a challenge, but I think it's going to become more and more important. More and more clients are asking for technology to be incorporated in learning. The interactions, like I mentioned, are both synchronous and asynchronous. They're digital and they're face-to-face. And in terms of the approach, obviously the communicative approach is still very important, but I'm not dogmatic in any way. It's principled in that it should be something that works. There should be evidence that it works. but it's completely practical. Whatever is effective in this specific learning situation is the approach. So I think that's quite a big change, certainly for me, between 2007 when I was cycling around Finkenwerder Airport completely carefree with the dog-eared copy of In Company Intermediate in my bag, to what I'm doing today. It'll be interesting perhaps to hear from people in the room now and in the future whether your experiences of the shift in business English, the accompanying shift from being a teacher to a trainer are similar. That's just the image credits for the pictures that I don't own that I used in this presentation. I'm going to pass the slides on to the conference organizers. They can post them if they want. So obviously you can't read that, but it's just for later. And with that, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone in the audience. Argentinian time. My German students would be very happy about that. Okay, great. So like I said, I'll pass on all my details. If any of you have any follow-up questions or comments, my email address is on the slide. It's pete.rutherford@bsic.org. And the IATEFL BSIG is really keen to build bridges with other teaching associations like APIBA. So we're very excited that to be involved in today's event. So thank you again. We also have Dana Poklapovic, who is speaking immediately after this, and she is going to be the IATEFL BSIG representative at your open forum. So if you have any questions about IATEFL or IATEFL BSIG, about joining, about our free online events, just getting involved, Dana is the person to speak to. So with that, good luck for the rest of your day. I hope you enjoy all your presentations, and I hope to meet some of you in person one day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We invite you to have a coffee break now. You're expected to be back in 30 minutes. Thank you.